thanks for being here today. We know you have a choice in education when it comes to your dealer requirement to take your 3-hour class, and we appreciate you being here today. We feel like we have the best and most informed education class that's available to the dealers in the state of Utah. We're there every day on Capitol Hill representing you, and we think that's an important aspect. And one thing is that we can give you many of the insights that have taken place on Capitol Hill and some of the discussions that went on that probably nobody else can give you. Our course today is going to talk about not only things on Capitol Hill, but also some of the other things that have been brought up by motor vehicle enforcement. And then we're also adding to that some of the typical things that we have a lot of dealers call us about, because more than likely if we've gotten calls about them, maybe you've wondered as well. And then at the very end of the class, if there's questions on certain issues that you have that are not in the curriculum, those will be coming as well, and we'll be happy to answer those. And if it's you need some advice for your dealership, we can do that after the class as well. So, and you can feel free to even call in after and get a hold of any of my staff to do that. So all of you should have a curriculum to go with today's discussion. We'll remind you that if you look on the inside, a couple pages. Well, first of all, let me remind you that we still do title and plating service for you, and we are going to be adding some plating and title services for you. One of those being DUI impounds. We know that a lot of you with Buy Here, Pay Here have DUI impound administrative fees to pay and so on and so forth, and you'll see why we've added that service as we go through our class today. Maybe some of you have heard about what we are able to accomplish at the legislature this year, but we'll be adding that and several other services to our repertoire of things we do for dealers. So keep tuned to our website or come into our office and you can find out about those. So if you turn into the next inside front cover of on page 4 and 5, there's a table of contents for you of things we're going to go through today. I would also remind you that I put this table of contents in there so that you can refer back to it. Many times dealers will have a question after the sessions, and I'll always refer to this handout that we talked about, and there's a table of contents. Second part of that being, go back and tell the people in your dealership what kind of action items or things that they need to take care of and what kind of changes have taken place. So you can go through that. On the welcome page, we always put our antitrust statement in there. Anytime we have competitors who are in the same room, we always make sure that we have antitrust covered, that we're not here to collude or talk about price fixing or market conditions or any of those kind of things. If you get close to that line, I'll gently move you back. We've never had that problem before, and probably because we have a specific statement on antitrust that we always follow. We do this with not only any meetings with dealers, but we also do this with our board meetings. Anytime we have a board meeting, we do the same thing. Then on page 7 is a reminder about our copyright. We're still having problems with dealers taking our forms and taking them to their local printer. We don't want your printer to get in trouble, nor do we want you to get in trouble. We spend a lot of time on these forms to make sure they're legal for you, but under copyright law, these are products and services that we own, and we don't want you to get into a problem where you're taking those and having those printed elsewhere. So. On page 8 is our plea, if you will, as an association, because the most important lobbyist we have on Capitol Hill is you guys, and I highly encourage you, as I've done every year, to know who your legislator is. You have a member in the House and one in the Senate. And this year is an election year, which is really important. I mean, what else is in the news besides elections nationally, right? And pretty soon it's going to start trickling down on the local level. And the way you guys get things done on Capitol Hill is to know who your legislator is. So if you don't know who your legislator is, please go back and read this page, go onto the state website, find out who they are and how interested they are. Call them on the phone. They're people just like us. They put their pants on one leg at a time, just like we do. They're no different. But find out who they are and how they feel about issues that are relative to the auto industry. And those are the really important things that we need to cover. I'm kind of their educator up there, so if they have questions, whether it be used cars or power sport or RV or title work or emissions or safety or any subject that is relative to our industry, they seek us out and say, what does your industry feel about this, and what's the history been, or what can we do to make this better, or can we do away with this, whatever the case may be. So I'd highly encourage you again to go onto that le.utah.gov website and find out who your legislator is. That's very, very important. And we're going to have things coming up, as we do every year, that we're going to need your help with. So let's talk about the legislative session for a few minutes, starting on page 9. To preface this, let me just tell you that this year there were fewer bills passed, even though we had a record number of bills that were pre-filed. They only passed 474 bills this year, which was down about, I'll say 60 bills probably from what it was last year. And so it still was a very busy year. It was a really hard session this year out in the hallway. There was a lot of very critical policy decisions that needed to be made by the legislature. Some even outside our association. I mean, you all heard about discussions about Medicaid expansion and medical marijuana and the budget and education, and all those things are important. And legislators take a very great responsibility making sure that they take care of that. Our budgets have to be balanced by our state constitution. They can't spend more money than what they have, which is really good. We're not like the federal government who can just run the printing press, right? Okay, so that's a good thing for us. And the governor has been very good to work with for budget processes and that sort of thing. Let me just talk about on page 9, the first bill. This is First Substitute House Bill 189. It's titled Motor Vehicle Impound Amendments. You know, for years, how many of you are buy here, pay here dealers in here? Anybody? Okay, we have some. One of the issues we've had in years past is someone who has purchased a car from you who you have a buy here, pay here arrangement with, and they all of a sudden get arrested for a DUI and have a DUI impound. So who gets to pay the DUI impound fee? You guys do, right? And who gets to pay the towing and storage? Now, you don't have to pay that, but if you want to get it out of the towing yard, and you better, because towing and storage keep adding up every day, right? So we've been considering for a number of years of how can we put that responsibility onto the person who caused it. Why should you guys have to go pay all the money for the towing? Because what's the cost of one DUI impound? $800,000, somewhere in there probably, okay? It's probably pretty close. So what we did is I had a pretty good thought this year, and I actually had one of the car dealers up in Layton found out who his legislator was, says, Representative Handy, we need to have a bill that will take the responsibility off of the dealers and put it on the guy who was charged with the DUI impound. And so Representative Handy called me and said, well, what can we do about this? I'm really interested in this. So I did some research, and for years I've been trying to figure out a really good solution. I think we found one this year. So what this bill does is it says, and I'll hit some points in here, but let me just give you an overview of it first. What it says is that if somebody has a DUI impound, and if they want their driver's license back, I mean, that's the one thing everybody wants back if they caught with a DUI impound or a DUI conviction, because they want their driver's license back. In the court system, it says that if you want your driver's license back in the court system, there's things that the judge says, these are things you may be able to do, and there's a list of things that you shall do, okay? Shall meaning you have to do these things to get your driver's license back. There's about 6 of them. What we did is added to the bottom of that code in the court system that says, if the DUI impound fee has been paid by somebody else, meaning a financial institution, which would include you as a car dealer or anybody else, and the towing and storage, if it's paid by somebody else, you have to go reimburse that dealer or financial institution before you can get your driver's license back. So that means there's going to be a process they're going to have to. Now, almost all these people want their driver's license back. And that's why we felt this was a great place to put that. So if you look at on page 9, about halfway down, it's highlighted there, a first conviction. If it's their first conviction, these are the parts that we added to the shall part. It says that they have to pay the administrative fee themselves if they haven't, or if somebody's paid it for them, they have to reimburse and have to take that and show reimbursement to the court before they get their driver's license back. The same is true if they've had prior convictions up to 10 years. Now, the one component in here that is not included yet, and I'll say yet because this is something we're going to take back, because a lot of times in the legislative process you can only ask for so much. So what happens if the guy pleads it out and it's not a conviction for a DUI? That's kind of the hole in this right now, that if he pleads it out, you're still kind of on the hook. But next year when we go back, we're going to add that component that says if you're going to plea it out, part of the plea arrangements are going to include the same thing as if you were convicted, because there's a list of those as well. So that will be the step 2 of this process. There will be we're working right now with the tax commission and the court system to have probably a tax commission form. We don't know for sure whether it will be under tax commission or the courts, but there will be a specific form that the violator will be able to get, and when they go pay that off or you pay it off, you'll receive that copy. They'll have to come to you to get a copy and signed by you that you have been reimbursed for the DUI impound administrative fee and the towing and storage. So there'll be a form specific. If the tax commission doesn't come up with the form, and I can't see them not doing that because they already have a printout that comes out, we're just going to ask them to reprogram that printout so we have room for the towing and storage portion. We will let you know when that comes to. Usually that's probably going to be another 30 to 60 days out, okay? At least by when this bill goes into effect, okay? So what we need to do is to make sure we follow up next year again on the plea abeyance and those types of things that come into play. I would dare say that if you're doing buy here, pay here, if you've had one DUI, this probably pays your dues like 3 or 4 times, okay? So I see no reason why every buy here, pay here dealer shouldn't be a member of the association, because you certainly got your money's worth. Certainly get. And this is the whole purpose of what we're here on Capitol Hill for. Because one dealer went to his legislator, just like I've asked you to go find out who they are, because one legislator, and in his testimony, if you go back and listen, the legislator said, this is the classic bill of the way legislation should work. Constituent has a problem, they go to their legislature, the legislature considers the problem and passes or whatever take bill. That's the ideal thing of relationships between representatives and their constituency, okay? So that's why we really encourage you to do that. Anybody have any questions on that? We spent a lot of time on that this year. This was really time consuming. It's the only bill that we took there to get passed. You know, we usually don't like to go there and get stuff passed. We usually go there to kind of keep stuff out or amend it so it makes sure it works, okay? My philosophy is if we could pass one and repeal 2, I'd sign up for that anytime, right? Okay, turn the page over to 10. House Bill 120 is a DUI enforcement funding bill. This ties into the same section of the code we just talked about. If you know, the DUI impound administrative fee is $350. Okay, effective May 9th, it's going to go to $400. It's going to increase $50. Where does the money go? The money is going to go to the public safety restricted account, and that money is going to be used for the DUI blitzes and that sort of thing to pay for the officers' overtime and other expenses they have when they do these DUI blitzes around the state of Utah. So we supported this, not vocally, but we did support it behind the scenes and said, yeah, I hate to increase fees for you and increase fees in general, but this was going to a good cause to get DUI people off the street. House Bill 129 is a towing surcharge. This also applies kind of to the same thing that a tow truck driver or impound yard. In the past, they haven't been able to pass on the transaction cost if somebody paid with a credit card. So this allows the towing yards to take the lesser of the actual cost of processing fees from the credit card company, or 3% of the total deal, whichever is less. So that will increase as well. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, our next one is on page 11, our favorite subject we talk about every year. Woohoo, safety inspection, right? Every year we talk about safety inspection because somebody wants to look at doing something with this. This bill did not pass, but Representative Thurston out of Utah County wanted to totally repeal safety inspection, totally do away with it, not just eliminate more years, because we only inspect in years 4 and years 8 and then 10 years and every year after, right? He wanted to eliminate all that. The only thing he wanted to keep in there is the section that covers salvage vehicles, that they would have to be safety inspected before they went on the road, okay? We were opposed to this bill. We were vocal about opposing this. He wanted facts and figures, and it's easy to get facts and figures on pass-fail through the Department of Public Safety on safety inspection. But problem is that part of the statistics aren't there. So for example, when somebody goes and has a safety inspection done on their car and they say, hey, I know the brakes are squeaking, I probably need to have them changed. If they don't pass, change them out, or the tires or something or whatever. Just go ahead and pass it. Well, a safety inspection isn't going to fail the car first and then pass it. He's going to just go through and make the changes and pass the vehicle. So that never shows in the statistics. What about all the statistics that there are for crashes that are caused because somebody had bad brakes or bad tires? None of those are ever investigated out on the road. At the best, maybe an attorney who might be involved would go inspect the vehicle after the crash, but that very seldom happens. So that was a problem. The statistical analysis of this is very lacking. As it ended up, we ended up killing this bill in committee. It was never heard by the floor of the House. And this bill, if you remember last year, we had a little survey form for you. Just the results of that survey showed that 82% of the people who took our class, both members and non-members, wanted to keep safety inspection. In fact, many made comments about we need to do more model years. And the other comment was, I do them anyway, so why shouldn't everybody else? And every vehicle should be safety inspected when it changes hands and is retitled. So those are the kind of comments we got about safety inspection. So as such, that's the way we represented you on Capitol Hill. If you want to be represented differently, you need to tell us, because we represent you based on what you tell us, okay? Any questions on safety inspection? The next one is unconventional vehicle bill. This is probably something new to you. An unconventional is considered what's called an auto cycle. You've seen all these newfangled three-wheelers and so forth that have come out. And the problem is Public Safety and the Driver's License Division didn't know whether to call them an automobile or a motorcycle. So they come up with this new term called auto cycle. Now the difference is if you straddle that vehicle, then it's considered under the motorcycle rule. If it's an auto cycle, so in other words you sit to the side, okay, then there are certain requirements that are done, and those are listed at the bottom. It says in an auto cycle, if it requires a driver of an auto cycle, and this is the last three lines at the bottom, page 11, requires an auto cycle subject to the same requirements, or excuse me, requires a driver of an auto cycle to wear a helmet if the driver is under 18, so that's parallel to what the motorcycle side is. And the auto cycle, if it's not fully enclosed or is not equipped with roll bars. So you have those three elements in there, so that way enforcement knows whether and what to enforce as far as helmet laws and those sorts of things, okay? And all of this follows parallel. If you're in that business, we checked with the manufacturers that are manufacturing these. There are new units coming out through our Power Sport Association. All of the manufacturers were okay with the way this is structured, so we work with them to get that done as well. Okay, there's some other power sport legislation that deals with the franchise laws. Is there any power sport dealers in here at all? Let me just cover a couple things. As you know, the word Tesla has been in the news a lot. In fact, they were in the news this morning. I think they had lines going out their door introducing their new model, believe it or not. This bill had to do with the Power Sport Franchise Act, which is similar to what the New Car Franchise Act, and there was some changes that needed to be made and updated with this. They changed in this bill, they changed the relevant market area. If you're in a county that has more than 225,000 people in it, then your relevant market area went from 15 miles down to 10 miles. And that's parallel to what the new car side is as well. And also it did a couple of changes on relocations. One, it said if you wanted to relocate, so if let's say you lost your lease where your business was, the original law said you can only move within 1 mile of that location. This expanded it to 2 miles in any direction from your existing location. But what if you wanted to expand further away from your competition? This adds that language in it that says you can move further away than 2 miles from your competition as long as you're not infringing on somebody else's relevant market area, as long as you stay within your own relevant market area. Okay, this is a bill that we were asked because of our past history with the power sport industry. We went and helped them actually structure the language of this, because the original language totally did away with the relevant market area in a county. If I was a power sport dealer in a particular county, I could just move anywhere I want to in that county. And so we changed that so that there's still parameters in there so that everybody's not invading everybody's market space. There's a real push with our legislature right now to do away with franchise laws. They say it's not the role of government to protect businesses and who can sell what, when, and where. And so that's an issue that we need to look at, particularly where the industry, the automotive industry, is the largest, just about the second largest generator of sales tax. Food used to be number one, but only certain foods are taxed now. But the automotive industry is one of the largest generators of sales tax. So we need to be really careful on some of these changes they do with the franchise laws to make sure we're not affecting the sales tax base. Okay, anybody have any questions on that? Okay, moving along on page 13. This has to do with license plates. You know, every year we have new vanity plates, what we call. They're called special group plates. There's 6 of them this year. 3 of them are just changes, or excuse me, 2 of them are changes and 4 of them are new. So I'm just going to walk you through so you're aware when your customer comes in about new plates, because you will probably get asked, isn't there a specialty plate for this, and how can I get it? So we put this all through, and you'll see that some of these have different implementation dates. You'll see in your handout at the top of that I put whether the bill passed and then what the implementation date. The reason why some of these are different is because it may tie to the fiscal year or a model year or time for the tax commission to put things together to get things in order so they can have this done. The first one is the In God We Trust plate. Remember a couple of years ago that was a brand new plate, and it's a specialty plate. It's the number 3 requested plate in the state. There's the 3rd most number of plates on In God We Trust. And a legislator decided that they wanted to take this out of the special group plates section and put it as a standard issue. So, for example, if you go to your vehicle application for title, in the section down here where it says what type of plate, Mr. Customer, do you want, there will be added to this. Currently we have the ski and the arches as the standard issue plates. There will now be a 3rd one that will be added, which will be the In God We Trust. Okay? So it probably will take a minor change in your programming if you're doing this with your program. We think there's enough room to put it on that line, because I don't want to go to a longer form of this, and I'm sure you don't either. So this will be changed coming up, and this, as I mentioned before in here, does not go into effect until January of next year. So January of 2017, it'll be a standard. That will be one of the 3 you can offer to your customers. Yeah, I have a sample downstairs. It basically has I think a flag on it, and then it has a logo on it that says In God We Trust as the strip that goes on it, if I remember correctly. I should bring a copy of that to my class. Good idea. Bottom of page 13 is the Children with Cancer special plate. This is a new one. It allows the health department you can make a $25 annual donation. The health department is over that. They are able to distribute that money to certain organizations who are working with children who have cancer. A lot of those will be like the Primary Children's and a lot of the different cancer organizations, probably Make-A-Wish and maybe some of those. I don't know which ones those will be, but that will be for the health department to determine. So over the page on 14 is personalized plate amendments. This is also a change bill for the military service. There were concerns that some of the military guys wanted to put different combinations of letters, and they wanted to put things like a year or a military branch or a badge of honor or something like, or numbers. And some of those numbers were numbers that the state would not issue because they thought they were offensive. Now some of those numbers can be used if they're tied into some other combination of letters and so forth in that group plate. The bottom of page 14 goes into the law enforcement. This is a new one that because they moved the law enforcement memorial out of the Capitol, it's now in a display outside in the Capitol grounds. They've always struggled with having the funding to be able to take care of the maintenance and the operation of that memorial fund. So that's a new one that they'll have available that you can make donation and have a law enforcement plate. Typically that is usually looked at by law enforcement families is typically where you see that. Over on page 15 is the second to last one. That's a military license plate. This has to be with where you can take your veterans plate that's already out there, and they will be adding some of the strip slogans on there that will say if you went to a certain campaign or a certain theater, or I don't know if it'll say Hill 403 or whatever. That's the one that's always in the movies, right? So I don't know how they're going to do that yet, but this will be coming out as well, so they can have this custom plate. Bottom of the page is a specialty new plate. This is the soccer plate. It's tied in and creates a National Professional Men's Soccer Team Support of Building Communities plate. That's a big mouthful, right? Basically is a soccer plate, and it'll probably have a soccer ball on it or something like that, so I haven't seen the design yet. But that is a $25 donation, which that money is used in the community to promote youth programs and soccer programs. And that will be actually controlled by the Utah Department of Heritage and Arts Department, which I found was very interesting. So those are your 6 changes and new plates that are out there. Anybody have any questions on those?
How many new plates are there now?
Gosh, I haven't totaled them up, but I think we're approaching 60, something like that. I know I have 2 drawers downstairs that are like, the drawers are like this wide, and they are packed with all the different ones in there.
Isn't that enough?
Well, what is enough? I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the suggestions I suggested to Representative Perry, who is a highway patrolman, I said, why don't we get the state out of the decal business? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, why don't we let these organizations just print their own? I mean, you have the plate that has the space on the left-hand side of the plate, and then there's a number. I said, when you go out on a call, do you call it in as a special forces plate with this number? He says, no, we just use the number. I said, well, then let's let people put on what they want, as long as it falls within the parameters and not being obscene and fits all the criteria that there is now. But let's let the organization print their own. Why do we care? Why do we care? So, and that's got to be a huge reduction in cost, because every one of these specialty plates, the state has to print up the decal and send it to every title office in the state, from St. George to Logan. So he says, I really like your idea. And so every time I saw him in the hallway, we're going to do that. Every time you see me, give me we're going to do that. You keep in touch with me. So this summer we'll probably be working on that, and you'll probably see this as a possible change next year that will be coming on. But yeah, when's enough? You know, I mean, there are so many different organizations out there that need help. Hey, let them have their plate in there, because really this is just an advertising piece for them. Great. You know, if I want to put Independent Auto Dealer Association decal on there, why can't I? Well, I can, but you know, why can't we just do our own? I would never do that, by the way. I think it needs to be left to the charitable organizations. Any questions on the specialty plates? Other ones? Perfect. Page 17. This is the Tesla bill. As you know, there was a Tesla bill last year that had to do with the franchise law. This bill we watched very carefully, particularly from the new car side and the RV side, because this bill doesn't address the franchise law. It addresses the motor vehicle side and definitions. So after about 18 months of discussion with Tesla and working with the New Car Association and us with the RV Association and others, and a whole myriad of lobbyists, we came up with a bill that met all the discussion items that we talked about with Tesla and the state legislators and all this kind of stuff to make changes. When we got this bill prepared and Tesla was in the meetings with us, Tesla decided, when we had our last meeting with them about 2 weeks before the session ended, they decided that they were going to walk away from the negotiations because they didn't like all the things that we had put in there for them. Well, that's not what you do with legislation. Kind of, there's good and bad. Sometimes you have to compromise with. But they decided to walk away, and they have, I don't know if they've done it yet, but they're going to file a lawsuit with the Utah State Supreme Court to challenge the franchise law to see if it's constitutional or not. Interestingly enough, we'll see how that kind of goes through. So we will be waiting for that to go through the court system. Once the court decides whether it is or it isn't, and however that's filed, we don't know, then we will probably address this issue again. But it does affect a lot of the dealers out there, particularly the new car dealers, but also the RV dealers and the power sport dealers, and anybody who's involved in the franchise is going to have a big effect. So that's kind of like, stay tuned for the next saga, right? See what happens. Okay? Let's go to page 18 and talk about a couple of insurance issues. This bill on top of page 18 is a vehicle registration insurance. This has to do with rental cars. So if you have a rental car company, most of the rental car companies have really had problems keeping their registration in the glove box for these vehicles, because people throw their rental contract in there, and when they clean everything out, they just grab everything out and take the registration with them. So there was a provision put in the law. We worked with the Car Rental Association and our association that the rental agreement will verify that the vehicle has insurance and is properly registered to be on the road. So there won't have to be an actual physical paper in the glove box, and then the renter gets the citation, which isn't friendly to our tourism group that comes in. And then cancellation of auto insurance. This is something we kind of watched. And it's something that we feel like you'll have to watch, particularly if you're a buy here, pay here dealer. This has to do with cancellation provision, and the bill prohibits continuing automatic charges after an insured cancels a policy. So if you have an insured that has a policy, which typically if you're buy here, pay here, you always require them to carry insurance. If they cancel it, this bill says that it can't be forced back into existence if the guy doesn't want it to. Okay, so you're going to have to watch those things very carefully, and because if it's going to go back into effect, you have to have the consent of the insured, the person that's driving that vehicle. So make sure that you watch for cancellation notices and those sorts of things, and make sure your customer maintains insurance on that. Page 19. Electric vehicles. That's something that's going to be coming into your inventory very soon. As I mentioned before, Tesla was in the news. This is the last day of March. Tesla was in the news day. There was a line of about 75 or 80 people that were trying to line up to go onto Tesla's computer system to order one of their new 300 series cars. It's all electric. They're now at a price point, instead of being like $145,000 for the other models, these 300 series are around the $35,000 to $45,000 range. And they're all electric. They're not going to be available for probably at least another year, they're saying, but people are now starting to order that. So that's something that's going to be coming into your inventory. Well, this bill in House Bill 130 says electric vehicle infrastructure amendments. This will allow the infrastructure to be put in place that allows a municipality or a military installation or a special services district, a county, a city, whatever, to be able to bond specifically for electric infrastructure to be taken care of. So we have more fueling stations, if you will, okay? I always get a kick out of the electric vehicle saying, hey, we're 100%, we're 100% clean. Well, we always forget about the electricity is produced by what? Coal and natural gas that we're charging our cars with. So you might take issue with that, but I think it's a good place we're going, but I think that's something you need to start looking at, because we're going to see more and more of these alternative fuel vehicles that are coming up. The other thing that's going to be coming up in our electronic age, in House Bill 227, this is telling the Driver's License Division and the Department of Technology Services that we are going to start seeing electronic driver's licenses. Okay, so you're always asking people for driver's license, just like if you go down the road and if you need to prove your insurance on your car, you can always pull it up on your phone as verification. That was passed 2 or 3 years ago. Now they're going to start looking at driver's licenses as valid identifications and government issued identifications. So I don't have to carry a wallet. I can just put it on my cell phone and show the officer, or show you if I'm going on a test drive or whatever the case may be. So that's going to be something that's coming down the road that you're going to watch. On page 20, autonomous vehicle. Y'all know what that is, right? Okay, this one basically is a study bill that says the state needs to study autonomous vehicles, these vehicles that are self-driving. And how are we going to handle that within our laws? And that's going to go into liability. It's going to go into all sorts of things that relate to the automotive industry. So this is something that we'll be involved with. And they have asked the committee that is working on this and these agencies to report back to the legislature to make sure that we're going down the right direction with these autonomous vehicles that are there. Questions? Okay, so that's all the new stuff. Let me cover some other things with you that are just as important. If you look at the bottom of page 20, I've listed some legislation that did not pass. Okay? The first one is a salvage title amendment, and this has to do with salvage, and salvage is always a discussion every single year. The salvage title amendments, and you'll see the letters NVTIS, that's NVTIS, you've heard that term before. Every salvage vehicle, when it goes through a state system, is assigned an NVTIS number. Representative Moss, who had a bill to change this, she wanted to make sure an identifying number was on every salvage vehicle, and she wanted to use NVTIS to do that. We came to this knowledge of this bill about not quite halfway through the session, and as we looked through her bill, the decision was made that this needs more work with us and working with her to see how we're going to handle that. Because they were saying, well, if you're going to advertise a vehicle, you have to get the NVTIS number and put it right on the vehicle, and what are the disclosures going to be, and how do we deal with inaccuracies if NVTIS is not correct, because we know it's only as good as the information going in, right? How is that better than what Carfax is versus NVTIS? NVTIS may, because Carfax gets their information from the same place, yet we see that Carfax has some failings in the percent that are correct. Has anybody not seen that? Okay, so we hear that all the time. It's not gold if a particular, whether it be Equifax or AutoCheck or not Equifax, but you know, those, I lose all the names of all the car search. What is it? AutoCheck, thank you. I knew you'd know. So all these are not 100% exact, and so we need to figure out a way when something is wrong, how we deal with that. And she agreed that this needed more discussion, so this summer, this will be a project we'll be working on as well. I'm not going to go through all these. A couple more used car sales tax amendments. This representative wanted to have the same trade-in allowance that you have as a dealer. So if I take my personal car and I sell it to my neighbor for $5,000 and I turn around and buy some other neighbor's car for $8,000, I only have to pay sales tax on the difference, kind of like you guys do with the trade-in. And when he saw what the potential fiscal note is, he said, maybe not, because that would be a lot of revenue out of the state's pockets. But we have to be careful with that because we don't want the state saying, well, if the consumers can't do it, let's take that away from the dealers. And that's been done in other states. So we have to be very careful that we mean that trade difference for trade-ins. The other bill that he did on vehicle inspections was a fix-it ticket. If you got a citation for a safety inspection violation, you could get that fixed, whether it be brakes or a windshield or a headlight or whatever. You could take that to the local jurisdiction and 100% of your penalty would be waived. That didn't go forward because he ran out of time with some other things he was working on, but my suspicion is that will be back. And I don't have really any issues with that. I don't have a problem at all with fix-it tickets. A couple more, House Bill 41, the window tinting bill, that was brought forth by one of the fallen officers' wives who was shot and killed. She thought that all the window tinting should be removed from a vehicle so an officer has a better chance of not getting shot when he walks up to a vehicle. That's a very difficult situation to deal with because you want to help officers and protect officers and that sort of thing. But in order to take, can you imagine everybody having to take all the tinting off their windows, including, I mean, you have those black privacy on Suburbans that you can't see in, and she wanted to change the opacity so you could see better through the windows to what it was like 20 years ago. Okay, clear windows, almost clear on the side, pass front windscreen the same way. That bill did not pass as well. The House Bill 143 was a safety inspection bill that dealt with the fee for large trucks. They wanted to raise the fee to $83, increase it from what it was because there's more stuff that has to be done on a large truck. House Bill 176, this is the bill we have seen for the last 3 years on Saturday, Sunday closing, and whether you can be open on consecutive days of Saturday and Sunday. That bill was numbered, and I think it was just an attention getter to let you know that they're still looking at that. But that bill never went anywhere. We voiced our opinion to the sponsor again that we supported the Saturday, Sunday closing law for a lot of reasons that we've talked about in these classes. So those are some of the things that didn't pass, and our list was very expansive this year. There was probably 65 or 70 just motor vehicle bills that affected you that we just watched to make sure that things weren't done to you that were unintended consequences, like in tax bills and other things that we didn't even list here. Okay, who has other questions? Any questions as we go further? Perfect, okay. Let's talk on page 21. This has to do with the secure power of attorney. You guys all know what this is, right? You've seen it 100 times. You get one signed by everybody that comes in, right? How many of you knew the language changed on this at the first of the year? Read your mail because we sent that out. The language on this changed. You can see where I highlighted it here. We had a county that took issue with the way it used to say that it said this form may be used only when the title is physically held by a lien holder or has been lost. Well, if we get this, if they got this in their title to do the title work on it, and it had the title with it, why does it have a title work? If it has the title, then you can't use this because the title wasn't lost or whatever, okay? This has never been a problem in the 20 some odd years when this was changed. So what we did is simply change the language on the top. It didn't change the format or anything. You didn't have to reprogram. And your new form would have been updated because we've been selling these since January. It says this form may be used when title is not present at the time of sale, which satisfied the county, held by a lien holder, or has been lost. So it's now 3 things instead of just 2. Okay, and you didn't even notice the change, did you? Because you don't need to. But we had a big discussion with a couple of the counties that say, hey, that one doesn't, it doesn't say if the title's there, that means the title wasn't lost, so you can't use it. And they were actually rejecting dealers' paperwork. So we got the tax commission involved, and they finally took the paperwork until we made the changes. The forms that you do have that have the old stuff on it, go ahead and use them. They're all good still. Don't throw them away. Still use those. And when those run out, the new ones will have the right language on it for you. They will not reject the paperwork. If they do, I need to know about it, okay? Because we can fix that, okay? I would also, as long as we're talking about the secure power of attorney and the reassignment form, we have seen some dealerships that have printed their own power of attorney form, the secure power of attorney form. You cannot do that. Just so you know, the federal law says that the state has to, if you're going to print your own, you have to be authorized by the state. So if you look in the second paragraph down on page 21, the power of attorney form is authorized and controlled by the state tax commission. Okay, it's not even our form. Any changes or reproduction of the form must be authorized in writing by the Utah State Tax Commission. Other self-printed forms are not authorized for use by the Utah dealer, and title work may be rejected if the proper form is not used. And it says that we are, as a IDS and Used Car Dealer Association, we're one of 2 distributors in the state that are allowed to distribute those. Because they're controlled federally, the state determines what that is. If you do want to print your own and you do want to go to the state and have yours authorized in writing, I put on the back of the next page how you do that and all the security things that you have to put in place to do that. I would suggest that it'd be much easier and cheaper just to buy the ones we have. But if you want to do your own, there's how you do it, okay? Temporary permits, okay? We haven't heard of any increases in temporary permit costs at this point, but the temporary permit is now going to change in its format, and they are not going to be sold in books anymore. They're going to be sold so you can run them through a laser printer. Okay, so this is, and I apologize, I cut the top off this one I printed this morning. You've seen the temporary permit. Okay, and there's the 2 sections here. Typically, these were on the one side of the book, and when you wrote on this one, it transferred carbon copy to this one. This will now go in your printer, and you'll have to have your software company, if you're putting in a printer, make sure it prints both of those, as well as you can set it up so it'll print the expiration date in there. Okay, so you're no problem. It's still the same. It's just that the format of how this is produced now will be different. They won't be sold in the books anymore. Now, let me retract what I kind of just said.
So where do you get those?
The same place, same process, same everything. So you can still get them for us, or you can order them online for the tax commission. They'll just become in a different, it'll look like that instead of a narrow book. Now the narrow books, the ones that we have currently, continue to use those. You're still accountable for those. You can still use those. Probably in about 3 months, the tax commission is going to try and get rid of as many of those books as they can. When those books, when you have to reorder and the books are not available, they will be selling these, and they're figuring in about 3 months. And that will depend on how many vehicles you guys sell. Okay, so that will be coming. That'll be a change for you. Okay, you are still under on page 23. I also talked about a couple more things. You'll have to do those changes with your computer programming. Make sure that when you put it in your program, you are putting the right dates on. We've seen some dealers who have put wrong dates on that have caused them a lot of aggravation. The temporary permits obviously are good for 45 days. Hopefully you all have the chart, which is on the next page. So what's 45 days from today? Well, I can't tell you unless I look at this chart. When it was 30, it was easy, right? Okay. But there's a chart there for you to keep in your office if you want to reproduce it or whatever. It just says whatever the date is today, you can go. That even includes leap year and other special dates. So we put a copy of that in there for your convenience. We would also remind you that, as they have done every year for the last couple of years, there'll be a temporary permit audit. Typically that comes out in October. And the Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division will be sending you a letter that says you have these permits assigned to you. Here's the ones that are not cleared. Pay the penalty. You have to pay the penalty of these unless you can show us that the temporary permit has been issued. So we also included just after on page 25 the temporary permit record. This is the one that the tax commission puts out. It's a TC form. Make sure that when you do your temporary permit record, you match up your permit number with the plate number on the vehicle. That's the way you'll be able to clear. So if they say temporary permit number this is not cleared, you can go in your computer system and see that the license number or the plate that was issued to this, that will clear that out and you don't have to pay the 100% penalty. When you get the audit, it'll show all the temporary permits you have in your inventory, and you can just put not used still, these are in my office, just as you've always done in the past. If you want to do your own temporary permit record, you can do that. If you want to put an Excel spreadsheet together or whatever, you can do your own. Just make sure it has all the same information on that temporary permit record. Okay? Any questions on temporary permits? Dealers are still paying over $1 million in temporary permit fines every year. It totally blows me away. I wish I could figure out a way to stop you guys doing that. I'd be happy to take that money from you if I could figure out a way, right? But somehow we got to stop all this bleeding of temporary permit penalties. So let's figure that out together, and we're just trying to give you ways you can avoid doing that. Page 27, let's talk about test drives. Anybody have a test drive vehicle stolen lately in this class? Good, there's one. I'm sure we'll have more as the day goes on. We put this in here. All of you are familiar with the test drive agreement form we have. We highly recommend that you get a test drive agreement, Because when the time comes that somebody comes in for a test drive and doesn't come back, you're going to need this information not only for law enforcement, but also for your insurance, because you have due diligence under insurance to protect your assets. And if you haven't done due diligence to protect your assets, then there's ways for the insurance company to maybe not pay claims, okay? Doesn't matter whether you fill out the whole form or not, it just gives information like, are you going to give them a certain amount of days? So guy doesn't do the typical weekend deal of comes in Thursday afternoon for a test drive and you said, okay, we'll see you in a while. Finally, not till Monday morning does he come back, and he thought you said, oh, I thought you said I could take it all the weekend and I drove to Vegas. Is that okay? Well, no, you were supposed to be back, you know. You laugh about that, but it happens all the time. I call you guys the great weekend free rental program of Utah, because that's what's happening. And when they come back, can the police arrest him? Because the guy shows up at the lot, the guy sees the car come in, he calls 911, says, you need to send an officer, I got my stolen car. What can the officer do? Nothing, because one, there was no clear delineation on when that vehicle had to be back. That's why it's important to use a test. We made one up for you. If you want to use your own, fine, we don't care. Okay, just don't copy ours, because it's copyrighted, but make sure you use some kind of test drive agreement to make sure that your customer knows when they have to bring, who can drive that? Do you want the guy's 16-year-old daughter who just got her license to drive your test drive over the weekend? Well, you better say so in there if you haven't. Make sure you're also getting copies of driver's licenses. Driver's license isn't sufficient. We have actually seen on occasion, I think Adam said, somewhere around 4 or 5 just recently since the first of the year, where people will come in for test drive. The dealer will hand the keys to the person. Sometimes in some situations they went in to get the dealer plate. Before the dealer come back with the dealer plate, the person's gone. Other situations have been the plate's on the car, the guy gives him the car, the guy gets in the car, locks the doors and drives off with the salesman standing there. That's how brazen they are right now. So make sure you're very careful in your test drive so you're not excuse me, so you're not losing those cars, okay? Any questions about test drives? Okay. Let's talk about authorization for payoff, because we got some comments back from our financial institutions. There isn't a specific piece in your handout, but there's going to be a piece added to that. It talks about authorization for payoff. All of you are familiar with the authorization for payoff form. How many days do you have to notify a lien holder when you have a trade? I heard 10 days, is that correct? Yes or no? Okay, somebody be brave and say no. The answer is no. Okay, you have 7 days. 7 days to notify a lien holder when they come in. It's on the form. Okay, you have 7 days to notify the lien holder. Doesn't mean you have to pay it off. You have to notify him. If you're going to pay it off within 7 days, the payment can act as the notification as well. Okay, how many days do you then have to pay it off to the lien holder? You like that 10-day answer, don't you? It's still wrong. Used to be. Yeah, old habits die hard, don't they? It's 21 days. Okay. If you can't deliver it, you always have to pay it off. Now, why is that important? Because if you look at your motor vehicle contract with the financing, if they agree or you agree to do the financing, the 21 days fits in with your motor vehicle contract as well. If you don't remember that, go back and read the right-hand side of your motor vehicle contract. The sale will tie right to this authorization for payoff. We also suggest if you're just writing the check and paying it off or transferring funds or whatever, you make sure that we've had some problems with some of the institutions who are paying off the wrong vehicle. They have multiple vehicles financed. If you do this form and have the information on the vehicle, the chance of them paying off the wrong vehicle are a lot less. Okay? Any questions about that? Perfect. You guys are good. Advertising, page 28 and 29. As you know, advertising is always we're seeing a lot more advertising violations. There's a couple areas I will remind you about. If you look at the top of page 28, it tells you what the penalties for not doing your advertising correctly are. Where it says disciplinary action for violations, it says that the first civil penalty is $250, second is $1,000, and the third is $5,000 for each subsequent bad advertising. They're watching advertising very carefully. And so that's what the penalty is. If you go over to the next page on page 29, you'll see where it says misleading advertising. These are the rules. There's a website there that's www.rules.utah.gov. If you click on that, you go onto the state's website and click on that, it'll give you all the rules. Those are the rules that talk about free and odometer mileage and all sorts of different things. There's a couple things that we wanted you to be aware of that were changes this year in advertising. One of those is that relates to salvage. If you're advertising a salvage vehicle with a branded title or salvage certificate, the disclosure shall be made by inserting the terms salvage certificate or branded title as appropriate. And it has to be, listen to this, immediately following the year, make, and model of the advertised salvage vehicle. No longer can you put it where you want in the ad. It has to go after year, make, and model. And the state is fining and citing a lot of dealers on this. So if you're selling salvage, make sure it's after the year, make, and model. Okay? Any questions on that? The second part of the advertising rule that changed, and I'll come back to your question, is the speed of words. And you get this mostly in new car stuff where you get the producer that turns up the speed of the all that quick language. You cannot do that. And and that's typically a new car thing. But if you're doing that on radio or TV, the quick speed of words spoken is also a violation. Any questions on advertising? eBay. What about it? What's your question?
I know people that advertise on eBay that don't even post their dealers or...
Do you know that they're dealers?
Yes, I do.
Then all you have to do if you go to MV, so the question is if you see dealers advertising on eBay, KSL, I don't care where it is, if they're curbing cars, if they're not doing their advertising right. I saw an ad just from another dealer, an RV dealer that I was doing some work for, where I had to tell him his advertising was wrong, okay? If you see any of those types of violations, if you go to Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division's website, it's mved.utah.gov, you can report all those, any of them. It'll ask for the information about what you're reporting, and you can do it anonymously. It doesn't have to come from you, okay? It's anonymous. If you remember about, has it been 3 or 4 sessions ago? I think 3 sessions ago, we changed the law that said any person who is selling, offering for sale, or displaying a vehicle for sale has to have their name printed on the title. You remember that? With a few exceptions, like immediate family members, like my son or something. I could sell my son's car or grandma's car. All these curbers, interestingly enough, these curbers are not getting away with that. I'll give you an example of Salt Lake City. Every case that Motor Vehicle Enforcement is giving to Salt Lake City prosecutor is being prosecuted because the city is making a ton of money on prosecuting people who are curbing cars. I need every single county and city along this Wasatch Front doing the same thing. That will eliminate, or almost eliminate, curbing as it sits. But other issues of bad advertising, turn them into the state. If you're uncomfortable doing that, send me the information. I don't mind turning them in. Okay, our deal is we have laws for a reason. It's to create an even playing field for everybody, right? And so everybody ought to be operating on the same playing field. And if you see somebody who has a bad advertisement or is curbing cars or doing things illegal, let's take care of it. That's what we have. If we don't, why have the law? Why have the law? Let's just forget all the license and just let. Now I do have some legislators who would think that. Why does government need to have all these licenses and stuff? Well, if they realize what the health, safety, and welfare is affected by that, they realize that we do need licenses for certain things. Okay? A couple other things to be aware of on page 30 is some national issues. We just received yesterday or day before a notice of a rule coming through Washington that deals with odometers. And it has to do with electronic title work and electronic odometer verification. And there's a new 40-page rule coming out that's dealing with that on electronic processes. One of the proposals in there is that we change the exemption. You know, we have an exemption for odometers. If it's 10 years old or older, you're exempt. They're considering changing that to 25 years. To 25 years. So you could have exemptions not go from 10 to 25 years. That's interesting because the average fleet is almost 12 years old in the United States. And if that's average, you can kind of understand their thinking for that. So there may be some changes coming down through Washington. That's why we affiliate with the National Association, because we have an attorney and that works with NADA and the RV industry and a lot of others to represent us in Washington, D.C. So that will be coming. The other thing that's still an open discussion is on open recalls. And the question becomes, can I sell a vehicle with an open recall? We covered that in last year's session, but the answer is yes, you can. But the other side of the coin says you better make sure you're putting out a safe vehicle because you put your liability on the line if you send something out that is not safe. That's just a fact and the way life is out there, unfortunately. Certainly Congress at this point hasn't come out with that, except the one thing they are considering is, particularly with these certified programs that have certified vehicles, if it's certified, shouldn't it have all those recalls taken care of? That's part of the new discussion that's taking place right now. I would highly suggest that this summer, which is on the last page, on page 31, on June 13 through 16, you attend the NIADA conference, which is a Used Car Association conference down in Las Vegas. It's close by. And they have a ton of great seminars and things are going. It's like NADA's conference. I can tell you right now, it's worth your time to go down. If you're in the buy here, pay here business, they have a complete buy here, pay here module for that. And they're also starting a new service that you can participate in 20 groups. Do y'all know what a 20 group is? They take businesses like yours of like size and so forth, and they tie you up with other dealers, up to 20 other dealers, and you can talk about the businesses that relates to you and your size of dealership, and they never pick anybody in your marketplace. It's always somebody from different states, and you take turns hosting meetings and talking about what works and finances and all sorts of things. Very well worth your time, but I'd highly suggest you look at some of these issues. And the last thing we'll have is our national attorney, who will be doing a government affairs session that will talk about all this federal stuff. I'm sure he'll talk about the recalls and all those things that we've talked about on a national level, and the issue concerning the odometer exemption on the mileage. That will be coming. Okay? So, who has questions for me? God, you guys are good. Perfect. We've been almost exactly an hour, and I think that's typically where we're at. I would say this, if I didn't, I have to make sure I do my job, that I think it is incumbent on everybody who's in this industry to put a little something into the industry that supports you, because it costs a lot of money to be on Capitol Hill, and it costs a lot of money to do all the things we do in Washington, D.C. And for $360, in fact, that includes a sign-up fee. We'll waive the sign-up fee if you join within a week of the class. And so that will be waived, and we hope that every one of you are members. Legislators always ask us every year, how many members do you have? I said, every car dealer out there in Utah is a member of our association. And they go, really? I said, yeah, some of them pay for it and some of them don't, but they all get the benefit. Okay? And it's kind of a joke thing we do, but the reality is we need your help. We need to, one, find out who your legislators are, and two, we need you to be involved in that, and three, we need the financial support that we need to make sure that, because you can imagine what life would be like if nobody was on the Hill representing you. And you can't count on the New Car Association or the Power Sport or the RV Association to do it for you. We have to be the leaders. This is my 38th session that we've lobbied up there for you. All the legislators know us, that when they have an issue that comes that it involves our industry, they come to us and say, what should we do about this? And then we offer solutions. That's what we're about. So I highly encourage you to do that. If any of you need an application, those are available online, or they're available out there on the table. We can put it on your credit card or however you would like to pay for it. Questions? Comments? Did you learn something new today? Great. We're glad you're here. You know that we're here for as a resource for you. When you have issues, if you have title work that you need help with, I have fabulous title clerks in all our offices. I have great staff that can answer questions for you. And if we can't get the answer immediately, we'll get it for you. Now remember that I'm not an attorney. I don't want to be, and I never will be an attorney, but we deal with the law. Our fingerprints are on the motor vehicle law in a lot of places, and so typically we know a lot of things, and we'll find the right answers for you if you need help with something. And just remember, if you're not a member, I always give you one question for free. The second one costs you $325. Right? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Sounds good though, doesn't it? No, we're here to help everybody. We just hope you'll pay your way. Any questions? Thanks very much. You can pick up your application out front. Okay, thanks for being here.